Welcome into the Washington Declassified Courtroom for another episode of Washington Commanders Declassified Podcast, your favorite podcast for all things Washington Commanders. Make sure you are subscribed and locked in. Tell your friends to tell a friend about this podcast and watch it on YouTube and then go listen to the audio in your car. They're both equally as good. Thank you for listening. Tonight, we have the trial of Chase Young. Chase Young is an interesting player for us, an extremely high draft pick. Tonight, Brian will be representing the prosecution in this situation, and this is with respect to his fifth-year option, by the way. And Eric is going to be the defense of Chase Young in representation of his fifth-year option. So I will be presiding over this trial. I'll be, Your Honor, the Honorable L.E. of the Commanders Declassified Court system. And with that, I will give it to the prosecution to provide an opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. We are here to talk about the number 2 overall pick, Chase Young. Lots of hype surrounding this young man, lots of possibility, lots of hope. And unfortunately, that's all it's been. It's been possibility. It's been hope. There hasn't been real hard production. And that's what we're here to talk about, because we have to decide if this young man should get his fifth-year option picked up. And unfortunately, the production isn't there. Again, there's hope, there's possibility, there's what could be. But the reality is it hasn't happened yet. And as we go through and as we present our case, you'll see there just isn't a lot there. Everything that the defense will try to tell you about Chase Young is projection. It is made up. It is fantasy, because none of it has happened and none of it is real. It is all want. It is all hope. And it is all prayer. Unfortunately for Mr. Young, it just hasn't happened yet. And I think when we present you with the evidence at hand, you'll see that the fifth-year option may not be the best idea for a one Mr. Chase Young. And to that, I yield to the defense.
Well, thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Good evening, Your Honor. Hello to the millions and millions of rabid declassifieds watching across the internet. The question tonight regarding Chase Young. Well, first of all, let's set some ground rules, because let me tell you what the questions aren't tonight. The questions tonight are not, is Chase Young a bust? The question tonight is not, is Chase Young a disappointment? The question isn't, should we have drafted Chase Young? The question is, should we have drafted somebody else? The question is, should a player who has an elite tool set, albeit not one that has produced much yet, but an elite tool set, should that player that the team invested premium draft capital into, should that player, Chase Young, be given an extra year to develop at a reasonable contract? So the defense, I'm the defense. I'm good at law and everything. The prosecution is going to try to tell you things. He's going to try to distract you. He's going to try to talk about stats. He's going to talk about sack totals. He's going to talk about tackles. He's going to talk about, he's going to give you every stat in the book that Chase Young admittedly has yet to really produce. He's going to then move on to stories about other players. He's going to say, well, look at the guys that he went to college with. Look at the guys that are on the opposite end of the other defensive end from him. Look at how much production those guys have. And then when that doesn't work, he's going to bore you with PFF stats like, I don't know, chip block win rate and badonkadonk spin ratio. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Twerking, I have no idea. But these are all things that are distractions from the real question. The real question is, has Chase Young done enough at this point to warrant the investment, to continue the investment that we put into him? And in my opinion, he has, and I intend to prove that tonight. Thank you. And God bless America.
Thank you for your opening statements, women, men of the jury. I want you to keep an open mind during this trial. Here are arguments. Make sure that you understand the context that is being delivered by the prosecution and the defense. And then at the end of this, I will come to a decision, a la Earl Warren, Chief Justice. All right, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and let the prosecution start its case here.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. That was a very nice opening argument by the defense. And you know what? Hey, he's right. I am going to use some stats. But first, let me ask you a simple question, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. When was the last time you heard Chase's name called during a football game because he made a play? If nothing comes to mind, it's because it's been a long time. It wasn't 2022. It wasn't 2021 where he had 1.5 sacks through 9 games, 4 quarterback hits. That's it in 9 games. You have to go back to 2020. 2020. That may well have been a lifetime ago. 2020. We're talking about the 5th-year option, which the 5th-year option used to be a pretty inexpensive thing to pick up. But hey, Chase Young had a great rookie year, that 2020 year. And because he made a Pro Bowl, that raised the value, the price tag of this 5th-year option. We're talking about $17 million to a player that you can't even remember when he made a play. You can't even remember when they called his name over the loudspeaker for making an impact play, which is what he is supposed to be known for. But unfortunately, he hasn't been known for that since 2020. And that price tag is $17 million. It's actually a little bit over $17 million. So for 0 sacks in 2022, 1.5 sacks in 2021, this is what you would be paying for. Again, all hope, prayer, fantasy that the production will magically appear in 2023, that everything will click, that the stars, the planets, the moon, everything will align, and all of a sudden you will have that dominant defender that you thought you might be getting, that you thought could change games for you, that you thought could be the face of the franchise. Unfortunately, it just hasn't happened, and sometimes you have to cut your losses. You have to recognize when something's not going your way, you've got to get out of it. You've got to remove yourself. You've got to make it better by whether you pick up the contract, whether you move on, whether you trade him, whether you release him, whether you go a different route from that opportunity or that player. And that player in particular that we're talking about is Chase Young. And we just haven't seen the production to warrant taking up this $17 million option. Again, as I finish and I close on my prosecution here in my opening statement, ask yourself this question again. When was the last time you heard Chase Young's name called for making a play? I don't know when. For me, maybe 2020. It's 2023 now. Prosecution rests, Your Honor.
Defense, would you like to rebuttal?
I would love to rebut. I have some, as far as the amount, first of all, I have one question for the defense, the judge, and anybody else. Who's paying that salary? Is it you? Is it coming out of your check? Is it your bank account that's being affected by that paycheck?
Yes.
Just curious.
Yes.
Why it's the defense's bank account. He's the mystery bidder apparently on that. Look, I understand it's $17 million, but I would like to enter into evidence per overthecap.com 2024's top cap hit for defensive edge rushers. $17.5 million would put Chase Young at about 16th. That's currently, right? That's not, guys getting new deals, anything like that. It's just where it stands right now. He would be about the 16th / he would be tied for the 17th, tied with Trey Hendrickson at 16 for the highest cap hit among defensive ends. Preston Smith is in that category. Josh Sweat is in that category. Matt Judon is in that category. These are guys that are solid, good players. I mean, they are. They're productive players. They're not better than Chase Young. None of them won Defensive Rookie of the Year, for example. And they are older. They're not guys. These are guys that are you don't think of when you think of dominant defensive ends. You don't rattle those guys off. And that's the category. That's where Chase Young is going to be paid at in 2024 should his extension be, or should his 5th-year option rather be picked up. We're not talking about signing him to a $20 million a year deal like we're going to have to with the guy opposite him, Montez Sweat, who, by the way, is a free agent after this season. He's playing on his 5th-year option. We saw with Deron Payne last year. We saw what a 5th-year option, the motivation that provides to a guy. Look, I love Montez Sweat. I would love to see him back, but look, let's be honest. We just re-signed Deron Payne, which, none of us really agree that we probably should have done. That pretty much sealed the deal for Montez Sweat. At the end of 2023, man, I don't love you hoes, I'm out the dope. he's gone. So are you prepared to lose Montez Sweat and Chase Young because you don't have Chase Young on a 5th-year option, even if he's not quite the player that you have expected him to be thus far, even if he doesn't live up to that this year? Are you willing to go into 2024 with nobody at defensive end, or whoever you draft this year? Are you going to draft a defensive end in the 1st round this year to replace one of those guys? I don't think that's a good idea at all. Oh, let's hear the objection.
This is not the trial of Deron Payne or Montez Sweat. We are here to focus on Chase Young. These distractionary tactics by the defense just should not be permitted.
Defense was simply pointing out the effect that not bringing back one Chase Young will have on a roster that will soon be depleted at that position should they not bring him back.
Objection overruled because the defense was using this context for his argument. However, please stick to the subject that we're talking about in the trial, please.
All right, Chase Young. Let me. As far as when's the last time he made a play? Now, that is a valid argument. He did have a very good game against the 49ers when he first came back, and his name was called many times in that game. But I don't have that directly in there. I'll just throw that. You can take that for what it's worth. However, I would like to point out that during the time that Chase Young was on the field in 2021, the first half basically of 2021, he did regress, as did the rest of the defensive line under Sam Mills, as did pretty much the entire defense. That defense was struggling in 2021, and to the point that it got the defensive line coach, whom many rumors were coming out of camp that the defensive line didn't get along with. He was fired. Jeff, I don't know how to pronounce it. Jeff Zwinia. He's got a lot of silent letters in his name. Anyway, he's the new defensive line coach. Every single defensive lineman progressed last year. Everyone took a step up. I don't see why Chase Young would be the exception to that rule. Better coaching makes a massive difference. So let's not write him off because he had a bad 2021 before a catastrophic injury that caused him to miss nearly the entire 2022 season. And he had 3 games to round back into form. So excuse him for not being an all-pro. So those arguments are just not great. And, I am projecting on hope, right? There is the option or the possibility that he's just not the guy. But there's no reason, if you invested that much draft capital into a guy, you passed up a franchise quarterback to draft this guy. You're not going to give him every opportunity to prove that he can't play before just letting him go and dumping him with Jamarcus Russell and Tony Mandarich. No, you're going to do that. You have to extend Chase Young. You have to give him that option. It's $17 million. It's a lot of money to us. By NFL defensive edge rusher standards, it's just not. It's slightly above average money, and thus far, despite what many people will tell you to say, would say, he has been a slightly above average defensive end. He's not a complete bust. He's not a bum. He's been pretty good. He's been close. He just hasn't had the production that that maybe we placed our expectations a little high on him based on his draft position. Coming out, being compared to Hall of Famers like Julius Peppers as soon as he was coming out of the draft. That's not exactly fair to him. So you're immediately putting it on him to play like that, or he's a bust, right? As a matter of fact, the defense would like to point out that when he was drafted on this very podcast, I made the egregious error of comparing Chase Young to only a very good player in Mario Williams. And I was laughed off of the internet, and Your Honor can back me up on that. But that's just the kind of thing. The expectations are unrealistic. Look at the PFF numbers if you want to be nerdy. Look at the body of work. He's been pretty good at defensive end. He did win Defensive Rookie of the Year. He wasn't terrible. The sack numbers weren't there in 21, but he wasn't awful. He wasn't a liability. He was just doing his job. His job was in my opinion, hindered by poor coaching. And, that's been resolved. I would like to see him get an opportunity. I don't want to just dump him and let him blow up with somebody else. And with that, the defense will rest, Your Honor.
Well, thank you both. All right, Brian, prosecution, I want to give you the opportunity for your closing arguments to the jury, please.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor, thank you for, enduring the wild storytelling of the defense there. And just to kind of bring us back to reality a little bit here, the defense did say that $17 million in 2024 would put Chase Young 16th, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around Trey Hendrickson, the defensive end for the Cincinnati Bengals. Just for reference, Trey Hendrickson is coming off 2 straight Pro Bowl seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals. He had 24 quarterback hits last year. He had 8 sacks. The year before, he had 14. But that's the level of player that we're talking about. So while he may not be earning, top 5 or top 2 or top 3 money with this extension, he's not even producing at the level of the 16th highest paid defensive end in the league. And for the number 2 overall pick, that is a problem. That is a very big problem. And that is a big red flag. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you are considering picking up this option, this 5th-year option for a player who is as talented as he is, and there's no question he has talent for days. But if you never see that talent realized in production on the field, does it matter? Does it matter if he has that talent? And I ask you, $17 million, when was the last time you heard Chase Young's name called for making a play? The prosecution rests, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Prosecution, case well presented. Defense, can you give your closing arguments to the jury, please?
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, the question at hand: should a player whom this team, who admittedly hasn't yet performed up to expectations, and admittedly was drafted ahead of a potential franchise quarterback, and admittedly possibly is the 4th best defensive lineman on this team, should that player be permitted to play one more season? Should he be allowed one more season to develop? This is a player who, yes, he was not, we could have drafted possibly Justin Herbert, right? But the fact is we didn't. We invested this draft capital into Chase Young. Chase Young should be given every opportunity to prove that he can play. He should be given every opportunity to develop. Would you like to see him cast aside after year 4, along with Montez Sweat signing elsewhere, and then this team is relying on James Smith-Williams and whoever, Shaka Toney or whoever else they have at edge rusher? Would you at least like the peace of mind of knowing that you have a at least semi-productive defensive end under contract for one more season? Then you have to make a decision on him? Absolutely. The answer to that question is 100% yes. You have to re-sign. You have to allow him to play on that 5th-year option. It's $17 million. It's money that's already spent, and you might as well get the most out of it. Okay. Well, it's not already spent. You could save $17 million, but what are you going to go get another defensive end to outperform Chase Young on a free agent market? You're going to have to pay more than $17 million, most likely, for it, because the prices rise. Okay. So yes, he has not yet performed. Yes, he 100% deserves the opportunity to improve and refine his game. And if after year 5, he's not the guy, that's when you move on. You don't cut him loose with no plan in place. The defense rests.
All right. Well, thank you both for very convincing arguments. And the jury and I discussed in my chambers, and we've had, some deliberation about what you guys have said. But this is the opinion and dissent that we've come back with. So the defense did a good job of pointing out that this is really not about money, right? Monetary considerations, because the salary cap increases year over year, right? Quite a bit, as a matter of fact. And as you guys know, old deals that are high become low deals and bargains in the future, right? This is about opportunity and whether or not Chase Young deserves an opportunity. And in order to justify that opportunity, you need to be able to definitively say that the story's not yet done being told on what he can be, right? The prosecution, however, brought in a really good thought process. Like, one of the things about being a high draft pick is you're expected to produce at a high level, right? You're expected to start your first year, and you're expected to make Pro Bowls. You're expected to be somebody that the team can anchor on. And in no definition has Chase Young been that, not even remotely close. Now, Chase Young may be a victim of his draft status, and Chase Young may be a victim of his expectations. And Chase Young will forever be linked to the quarterback for the Chargers that we did not take because we have not solved that position. Now, that's not Chase Young's fault that we haven't solved the quarterback position. He didn't draft himself here, but he is forever going to be linked to us not solving that position. The issue is that though Chase Young may be a victim of his draft status, he hasn't even produced at a 3rd round draft pick level, right, in his time in the NFL, right? From a statistical standpoint, at a defensive end, right? We can talk all you want about run support, right? Almost, QB pressures and things like that, but defensive ends are here to get to the quarterback. Bottom line, right? However, when you look at fifth-year extensions in the NFL over the last several years, guys that have gotten the fifth-year extension going back to 2020 have averaged about 6.6 sacks the year when the extension was picked up, not the year the extension was enforced. So year 4, about 6.5 sacks for defensive ends. That's not that high. And if you factor in Chase Young's injury, he's not that far off, right? So he was unhealthy for most of last year, I think all of or most of the year prior to, even though he wasn't getting to the quarterback. It was a significant period of time that he missed. In total, the folks that have had the defensive ends that have had their fifth-year option picked up have average about 40 sacks for their career thus far. They're still playing, but going back to 2020, about 40 sacks. Now, when you look at the disparity for players who have not had their fifth-year option picked up, they average about 2.4 sacks the year before the option is exercised. And then they average about 20 sacks for their career. Statistically speaking, Chase Young belongs in that lower category, right, of players that have not had their fifth-year option picked up. Total sacks wise, I think Chase Young is also a little bit of victim of what we thought he would be coming out of Ohio State. We thought he'd be a Bosa brother kind of player. And I think what we're finding out is he's more of a Jadeveon Clowney kind of player, right? Our expectations were incorrect. And so Jadeveon Clowney is a very effective player for a ball club, but he's not what you would think that, Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa would be. If Chase Young were drafted 30th overall, I don't think we're sitting here having the same conversation. I think if he was the 30th overall pick, you'd pick up his option because of the immense talent that he has. And again, because you cannot definitively say that he's not going to continue to develop, and the amount of capital that you put into that pick and the amount of talent that he has. The NFL is a talent-based business. It is a traits-based business. And in order to win, you must have elite level talent. Therefore, you have to pick up the fifth-year option for Chase Young to give him another opportunity to develop within the system. I would also like to add the context that really no player at the defensive end position has been successful in this defense to this point. And so the fifth-year option is going to give you some considerations going into the following season because you may have a new defensive staff, right? And a new defensive staff may bring about a new defensive philosophy that enables your defensive ends to be more productive and more successful. And I would hate to not be able to find that out. Montez Sweat has been reasonably successful, but even he, for a first-round pick, what was he, 15th overall? I don't remember the exact pick. But what was it?
He was in the 20s. Yeah,
Yeah,
they traded back up, 25, 26, somewhere around there.
You're right. But even he, at his stat level, has been good. He's had periods of complete, just ineffectiveness, and then he has some spurts. So that lends me to tend to believe that there's an issue with this system as it relates to the defensive ends, especially because our defense is built around the interior of the defensive line. We got to find a way to make our players more effective, regardless of Chase Young's fifth-year option. But because of the fact that we failed to do so, I think you have to give him an opportunity because you can't put it squarely on his shoulders. Now, Chase Young has to stay healthy. Chase Young has to stay engaged. And if for any reason we have another repeat season like this, there is no question about an extension. There's no question about anything else. After, if this season looks like this, after this, he plays out the fifth-year option, sayonara. You move on. Clean slate, because the NFL is constantly bringing in new defensive ends all over the draft board now. There are elite athletes no longer playing receiver and other positions. They're playing lean defensive end positions and just getting to the quarterback. That's a business to be in because defensive end, I believe, is the second highest paid position in all of football, right? So it's a marquee position, meaning that more and better athletes are going to start to play the position, and they have in the college level and come to the NFL. They follow the money, and that's the way it goes. When it was financially productive to be a running back, they played running back. When it was financially productive to be a receiver, they played receiver. And now it's defensive end. Those guys are getting quarterback money. So You can find a replacement for Chase Young. I just think because of his elite traits and talents, you have to give it another season to see what he is and then cut the bait at that point. That is my ruling. That is official. Chase Young's fifth-year option should be picked up in the court of Washington Commanders Declassified Podcast.
Well done.
I'll take it.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, jury, you are now excused. You may go back to your homes. And start
Marty
watching
here.
And for the record, I would also pick up Chase Young's extension. There is no reason not to, regardless of how much it costs. You give him that opportunity to be great.
And I would cut him today.
Gotcha.
There it is. The trial of Chase Young's fifth-year option. Once again, we appreciate you guys checking this out. Like, comment, subscribe. Give us your thoughts in the comments about whether or not you would pick up this fifth option and why or why not. You can find us on Twitter. I am at Declassified WFT. You can find the prosecution, Brian, on Twitter at Mr. Who 120s. And you got Saul Goodman / Eric at ETROD42 on social media. Plug in with him. If you like these, let us know in the comments because we may have some more coming for you. If you hate them, let us know in the comments too. And we're still going to have some more coming for you. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for checking the podcast out. We appreciate all of you. Make sure you tell your friends, get ready for the Commander season with us. We are out of here.